most great founders have a very clear spike. They are not great at everything, but they're really great at something, and then they leverage that. So that's number one. Number two is they have a ton of drive. And drive is very different, I think, from passion. I think passion is important. It's great with passionate people, but we all know a lot of passionate people who never get anything done. So passion in itself is not enough. Drive is more, yes, you're passionate, but you also have that combined with raw ambition and the ability to execute. So can you see that people have moved things forward in the past, achieved difficult things, hit milestones, and are they really ambitious about solving an important problem and doing something really big? So that's number two. Number three is grit. Right? Great founders never give up. Right? They just keep on hammering.
Absolutely. We're not looking to use AI to replace lawyers. I mean, lots of fun and games in the press about that, right? New technology like this comes out and our knee-jerk reaction is to go full force and just, replace all lawyers. No, it's not going to work. But there's a whole bunch of high volume, low value, repetitive work that lawyers do every single day of the week.
We had a really deep conversation one day and say, well, what do we do if one day, let's say social media dropped off the face of the earth? Like, how do we remain a real legacy business and continue to have the impact that we have? And I mentioned it before, it's one of the things that still to this day, it doesn't matter what time or when we read them, when we see the impact that our work has had for a person, I get the same butterflies in the stomach and the same feeling of like, this is the reason why, this is our purpose, and I feel as though a lot of my purpose to be able to do this.
And, the COVID hit. And
yes.
Yeah, I don't think it will happen. Like one day when there's a digital human who could be very lifelike, very intelligent conversations, and it could be agentic. The digital human interface that we're building could enable a lot of automations in just one screen, right?
Hi, this is AI Edge, powered by Microsoft, an unplugged podcast series exploring how AI is transforming Asia's startup landscape. Each episode features candid conversations with founders and industry leaders who are pioneering the next wave of tech breakthroughs. We'll delve into their personal journeys, uncovering what it takes to scale impact in the evolving world of AI. Whether you're creating the next big thing or navigating the challenges of growth, this podcast is your front row seat to the future of AI. Let's get started. Hi, this is Neha Mittal. I am the Director for Digital Natives in Asia at Microsoft. And with me is Magnus Grimeland. Thank you, Magnus, for being here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
It's amazing. We've known each other for now, we were just counting 15, something like that.
17 years.
We lost count. It's such an honor to have worked with you and, just following your trajectory over the years. So just to introduce Magnus to everyone, Magnus is obviously got an illustrious educational background with Harvard. He's been my manager at McKinsey. So, a lot of amazing work done there. And then the entrepreneurial bug caught him, and he founded Zalora in Singapore, had the most amazing exit during those days, the biggest one, I believe. And then founded another company called Antler, which is one of the biggest early stage VCs in the world. In fact, the biggest, I believe, AI VC in the world today. So it's been such an honor and it's been amazing knowing you, Magnus. I'm so glad that we could do this and I could know more about you, that I've pinned you down here now on your journey, really. So thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot for having me. Big fan of your work. It's been great working together, and very excited to have this chat now.
Awesome. So Magnus, why don't we start with your journey? Like I said, I've pinned you down here, so I would love to know more about what makes you, the energy, the passion, the eye for impact. Just take me through your life journey, really. And I know you can synthesize.
Well, I grew up in the countryside of Norway. It's about a 10 kilometer to the closest store, small community of people.
Wow. Yeah.
We're kind of very interested in books, reading, school, but at the same time did a ton of sports with my father. Ended up at United World College, Atlantic College, for high school. I read this newspaper article about this school in the castle. Got very excited about that, applied for a scholarship and got that. and spent the 2 last years of high school taking the IB with people from all over the world. There was 80 plus nations there, and then got very excited about the potential of the world. Then left that to serve in the military. I was in the Norwegian Naval Special Forces, then off to Harvard, which was interesting times. It was 03, 07. So basically when that second wave of tech growth came. So you obviously had
the boom and the bust.
And for a couple of years there, people just didn't invest in tech because people had lost so much money.
Yeah.
Possibly a little bit similar to what we saw in 22, 23 and after the financial crisis. But we kind of came in at that next wave of growth. And we obviously had Facebook come out of campus and a lot of other great companies.
That was quite an interesting time at the Harvard campus.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another podcast for later.
Exactly. Yeah, good times. I got very interested in tech, launched my first tech company then, where we had a very small exit, but it felt big for me at the time.
Wow. Okay.
Wasn't a $1 trillion company, but which Meta ended up becoming. But obviously, you learn a lot from building these small things on the way.
Absolutely.
I then joined McKinsey, where we had a tremendous time working together in Asia and in Europe. I also spent some time working in the US. I worked with technology companies the whole way from semiconductors up until media, telecom.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then left to set up Zalora. Zalora very rapidly became the biggest fashion e-commerce business in Southeast Asia. We sold that back in 2015. At the time, it was one of the biggest exits in the region. And then we saw a lot of the people we had worked with leave to build the next generation great companies. Wow. So, Kevin and Nadeem built Gojek out of Indonesia, which IPO'd at 23 billion.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So they used to work at Zalora. Yeah. And Chris Fenger built Shopee, which is the largest e-commerce business here now. And Mikel Ferrari built Stashaway. Our CRM team built Shopback and Lockad, Aura. So lots of companies came out of Zalora. And we got excited about backing that next generation great founders. So we set up Antler here in 2018 to really do that, to back the next generation great founders in emerging ecosystems, but also the biggest ecosystem in the world. So now we're present in 30 locations, all the way from the biggest ecosystems in the US to emerging ecosystems across Southeast Asia, Africa, Europe, South America, and Australia.
It's just exciting times. Thank you so much. I think it's been so amazing, the scale at which you've grown Antler, and so quickly and so successfully. So we'll come to that in a bit. And I didn't know you'd already been a founder before our McKinsey days. So 3-time founder.
Yeah, well, the first one was very small.
Yeah, but I think you're the best person to ask this question on what's the mindset for success for a founder in today's world, especially?
We think there's really 3 things that stand out. And the great thing is you're not really born with any of it. You can develop all 3, I think. One is some spike. So something you're better at than most other people, right? So you, for example, are incredible with people, getting them exciting, pulling them together towards what you want to do. Some people are great at, a specific algorithm or a coding language or building products. Mark Zuckerberg is a great example of that. Most great founders have a very clear spike. They are not great at everything, but they're really great at something, and then they leverage that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is they have a ton of drive. And drive is very different, I think, from passion. I think passion is important. It's great with passionate people, but we all know a lot of passionate people who never get anything done.
That's true.
So passion in itself is not enough. Drive is more, yes, you're passionate, but you also have that combined with raw ambition and the ability to execute. So can you see that people have moved things forward in the past, achieved difficult things, hit milestones, and are they really ambitious about solving an important problem and doing something really big? So that's number 2. And number 3 is grit, right? Great founders never give up, right? They just keep on hammering.
Absolutely. I think it's so important.
Everyone has experienced that, right? Microsoft in the early days had a lot of these moments where things were very, very tough. Yeah. If you look at any great founder in the world, they built a business which at some point of time went through near bankruptcy, or they were like running towards a wall and they couldn't find a way around it. But then they do, right? The best example of that today is probably Elon Musk, who's obviously a little bit controversial these days, but he's undoubtedly a great founder. And if you look at PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla, X, obviously now, like most of the businesses involved in, they have at some point of time been very, very near death, and sometimes many, many times. So sometimes it's not the best team that wins, but it's the ones who don't give up. So those 3 things.
Awesome.
Spike, drive, grit.
I think I call it resilience, which is kind of a mixture of grit and the ability
Yes.
to, drive.
Yeah, resilience.
The spike thing is super insightful for me because I never thought it that way, that, there's one thing that you bring to the table which really makes a difference. And that's what you were talking about. So thank you for that. I think that's an amazing insight. You grew out of Asia, Antler, right? So you had that choice. You could have done that anywhere in the world. What is the advice you have for founders starting out of Asia, especially in this AI-driven world? Like, what are the challenges and how do you think they can overcome that?
First of all, obviously, the region is insanely exciting. You have more than 1 billion people in India, more than 1 billion people in China, about 1 billion outside, a bit less than that.
Yeah.
And it's young population growing incredibly fast, with the middle class, which is growing faster than anywhere else. The digitalization you saw here is quicker than anything. I remember when we were building Zalora, we looked at the digitalization growth in Malaysia compared to Italy. And Italy it started digitalizing much earlier. But when Malaysia started digitalizing, they caught up in 3 years, right?
Wow.
And that's what tends to happen here in Asia. Is once you have new technologies available, it just scales incredibly fast. And now a lot of the infrastructure has been put in place, like for example in India with UPI and so on, that you can also scale businesses with much lower basket sizes and do it profitably. So it's just an incredibly exciting environment to build into, right? So I think that's number one. Number two, there's an insane amount of talent here, right? And I think that goes a little bit to your question around AI. Is I think if I were a founder here in the region, you should really be ambitious. And the first thing I'd look to do is build for the world. I think the biggest companies coming out of Asia over the next decade is going to be companies that are built for the world. I think if you look at the biggest companies that were built there the last decade, they were built for the region, right? They were
The
biggest in India
marketplaces
or
and-
the marketplace or
Yeah,
Grab
that's
Taxi
true.
zone, or the biggest in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
But we're really seeing in our portfolio now, and the best backers, the best founders that we back, they're really ambitious at winning in what they're doing globally. And you can do that now out of anywhere. You just have incredibly great talent there who can do that. So that I think is number two. Number three, in terms of building into AI, right? So the way I think about it is, if you have a feeling that your strength is amongst the best in the world within hardcore technology related to building AI infrastructure, there's a real opportunity to do that and win in that out of here, right? So we have a number of Antler portfolios who's doing that. For example, we have one out of Singapore which does that for the logistics industry. And they're working on very different data sets than you work with if you're building a ChatGPT or a Grok or an Anthropic, right?
Yeah.
So that's one area. Then on the application layer, you can also look at global opportunities to solve important problems. And there will also be, as we saw with the cloud wave, with the internet wave, with the mobile wave, there will be opportunities to also customize things for the region, right? Because one thing that is true here in the region is that the diversity in languages, culture, religion, all the things are very different. So you will also have that bucket, right? So it depends a little bit kind of where you find yourself in terms of competencies as a founder and what your strength is. But there's really opportunities across all three. And if you can do it, I would think global.
I think that's so important to build for the world. And I would also add to build something that changes the world in a positive way, because that's also something we're seeing the Asian ethos and culture brings to the table. So thank you for that, Magnus. I think, in my work every day with startups, I see, Korean startups and Japanese startups really starting from that point that you made, that we are diverse, and some of the models, for example, may not actually work really well in that region, and so starting with local, but then also expanding and doing things globally. For example, I have a startup in the marketing space which is building tools to better marketing ROI, and that's something global, that can be used anywhere. So thanks for that. I think that's a super good advice for startups in this region. I come back to my question on scaling, because I've seen you do this so well over the past few years of scaling Antler across 30 different countries. And it's been amazing to watch that, especially over the COVID period. You did that, you didn't stop, or, I think you only expanded further. So what is your advice on, to your point, if we're building for the world out of Asia, how do you scale globally?
First, it obviously starts with that thing we spoke about earlier, right? So you need to have a core team of founders that have a spike driving grit, and preferably you have a team of 2 to 3 or 4 of them. Once you have that, you build a culture around that, right? Which is, so everyone you bring on board, you build a culture which is similar all across the globe or all across the countries that you go. Like culture tends to kill strategy in the long term, right? And if bad culture will kill companies, great culture will let you scale incredibly fast. So I think that's number one. Number two is obviously there needs to be an exciting and big enough vision and business model around the big problem you're trying to solve, right? Where you can really get the best people in the world excited all across the globe, right? And then number three is then building a common operating system, and there technology comes in, right? Where, so for example, in Antler, we have everyone operates on Antler Fusion, which is our operating system. So from day one, we built a technology system where all the founders gets integrated, all the interviews we do, all the investment committees, when the portfolio is, when we invest in a company, they're part of the portfolio and they can interact with each other there. We have 1,000 advisors who are onboarded there. We have 3,000 VC relationships. We have, perks. For example, we have a great relationship with you guys where we have access to, free cloud credits and mentorship. And we also did a great thing with you on backing female founders. So we integrate all of this into one operating system so that once a new node is added, it makes the whole stronger, right? I think if you try to scale where, as you scale, the center of attention gets diluted, right? Then
that's when the problem starts.
Every node you add, this gets worse and worse, right?
Yeah.
But if you build one common culture where the people you bring on board are kind of bought into the way you operate the system, you ensure that everyone is rallying around the same idea and the same mission that you're trying to achieve, and you combine that with a really great operating system, then actually as you add a node, let's say we add Korea to that, then suddenly we're tapping into all those competencies in Korea, all those great founders in Korea. There's a ton of industries where Korea is kind of leading in the world, and suddenly that is made available to the rest of the world, right? So that's very much how we think about it with Antler. That's how we thought about it with Zalora. That's how I think great companies like Microsoft have been able to grow global and be. Sometimes you actually end up being like stronger in some other markets than you were in your initial market, right? And McKinsey was was another great example of that.
Absolutely.
Where the CEO of McKinsey is elected by the partners, and he can kind of come from anywhere.
No, I think that's an amazing analogy where you said, it's almost like a hub and spoke model where you attach a node. I like that visual analogy of attaching nodes to the mothership, so to speak, and how,
making it stronger.
Yeah, and then you modularize and scale it because that's a scalable model. And the culture bit is so important, and I totally agree with you. And I think Microsoft or some of the other companies that you spoke about, they all have pivoted really heavily on culture. So it's no longer that, it's not just a soft need, it's a hard need for a company to have this.
And there's an interesting thing there also with companies who are expanding into Asia, right? So I was just listening to Travis Kowalczyk, who started Uber, and he said like in the early days, they brought innovation to Asia, and then very quickly their kind of top engineers in Asia were developing features which were above and beyond what they had in the US, and suddenly you have this reverse innovation.
Very interesting.
Which very quickly can get there in the region because there's a very entrepreneurial culture across Southeast Asia, India and China and Korea and Japan. Obviously a tremendous amount of smart people. Like, I think, more than half of the world's engineers are being educated. I think like 60-70% of the world's engineers are educated. Yeah. So very suddenly by, expanding here in the region, it also can just make your product much stronger.
Much stronger. That's a great point actually. And I never thought of culture that way, but just having that openness of, in Microsoft, we call it a culture add. So not a culture fit, but how are you adding to the culture? I think that's a great point. Thanks for that. In terms of your own philosophy of AI, like how are you using AI in your daily life, I guess, and also in Antler's operations? You talked about the great operating model. So is there any instances there?
Perhaps I can talk about it in two ways. So there's like how we look at investing into AI, which might be useful to founders who are looking at this. And then we can talk a little bit about how we use AI ourselves. So like the way we invest into AI, we really look at it as being kind of broadly three categories. There's a fourth one as well, but three categories we really care about. One is infrastructure, which can probably be kind of general infrastructure. So, chips that is used in all AI models, API layers, or fundamental models, or whatever it might be. Or 1B, which is a more vertical models, which is literally, okay, let's say you're doing a drug discovery, or you want to look at the genome data to predict how you can better develop new drugs, or let's say the logistic examples I just made. There are a bunch of data sets that are not generalistic, but where you actually can build much better outcomes by being specific. In that category one, we're really looking for founders who are the best in the world at what they're doing, because whoever is winning there is going to be one or two people within kind of each product, and they're going to be the best in the world at what they're doing. Some of them are here, some of them are other places in the world. But if you're investing in that place, or if you're building in that place, ensure you're amongst the best in the world, because to win in the infrastructure, you kind of need to be.
You and I spoke about this, but it reminds me of the 2010 telecom boom, where you had 18 companies at least in India, we had that, I think it was globally. And then there was a huge shakeout and the best survived. So I think this is similar. What you're saying is there are going to be a lot of these players, and then you need to be the best to be able to.
There's a lot of learnings of these kind of past cycles with a lot of different industries. The other thing that is interesting with infrastructure is a lot of value capture in the early days happens within the infrastructure layer. And then over time, the application layer gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Right? If you look at it today, the biggest companies in the world in internet or in building computers or whatever it might be, they're not the infrastructure layer.
That's true.
They're the application layer, right? Like you will probably see the same with AI. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of allocation there, but then it brings us to category 2, which is application layer, just building on top of the infrastructure. And there, in the same way as with mobile and with cloud and with computers and every kind of major trend you've seen, it becomes more about just backing the very best founders, and they don't necessarily need to be the best AI engineer in the world, right? Like if you think about it, when Mark Zuckerberg built Facebook, he wasn't building internet communication devices, right? He was building applications on top of the internet.
Absolutely.
And that's where the vast majority of biggest opportunities will be over the next decade. There it becomes about, identifying an exceptional problem which either has been solved before and you can now solve it better with AI, or it hasn't been solved before because technology hasn't been able to do so, but you can now do it with AI. And there you will see the most amount of value capture. And the type of people we're looking to back there is just great founders, right? In the same way as in the mobile revolution, you weren't looking for mobile engineers. You were just looking for people who could build great products, right? So that's category 2. Category 3, I think, is AI enablement, which any company needs to look at, right? Which is how can you enable everything that you're doing, which brings us back to what we're doing with Antler, right? So with an Antler, obviously, we have now 160,000 founder applicants per year. We have to select a few thousand of them that we spend real time with, and then we have to select a few hundred of them that we back with capital. AI can be incredibly helpful in terms of helping us with decision making, not making the decisions, because AI is fundamentally based on past data. And what we're investing into is innovation, which is something the world has never seen before. And AI is not quite powerful enough to do that yet. But it's very good at helping you do that more effectively. We obviously use it to write code in our Antler and our operating system that we talked about earlier. We're doing it in terms of research. There's a number of ways we are getting supercharged by using AI, and every single company in the world should look at what processes can they get the most leverage out of using AI for today. So that's, I think, is category 1, 2, and 3. And then there is this kind of fourth category, which is you always see in this massive platform shifts, right? Everyone throws AI into their pitch deck. You need to ask kind of why, how, and really go deep, because very often people do it because it's the right thing.
The .ai phenomenon.
Exactly, right? And just by kind of asking 6 or 7 questions, digging deep into a specific thing, you can kind of quickly figure out whether it's real or not. And there are many technological challenges and problems to be solved out there, which you will not use AI to solve currently with other type of technology. So you kind of steer away from that category 4. But there is an insane amount of opportunities in 1, 2, 3.
Very well said. And I love that analogy of saying the application layer is where most of the, in the previous waves, that's where the valuations and the real value to the world was, and it's going to be similar with the AI platform shift as well. So really well said, and the AI enablement is actually where we play a lot of between
For sure.
both of us play a lot of the time and effort. And I see exactly what you said, right? Like it's more a co-pilot approach to saying how can AI help a human do their job better, and that's the enablement part. So thanks for that, Magnus. I think really insightful on how you do your investments and how you think about AI. How do you ensure that you have diversity in your portfolio, not in terms of just the type of companies, but in terms of the type of founders? So just love to hear your thoughts on that.
What is very clear is that the founders of the future, yes, some of them will look like the founders of the past, but a lot of them will not look like that, because the world is moving at a rapid pace where now you can build incredible companies out of anywhere. And the opportunity for people from any type of background, as long as they have the right intrinsics, they have a spike, they have the drive, they have the grit, they can really move mountains and change the world, right? An example is, a decade ago, 38 cities in the world had built a unicorn. Now it's almost 200 cities in the world. And the diversity of the founders that are building this is changing a lot. So for us, what is very important is tapping into the global human potential of great founders. And what we've seen is that they can really come from anywhere. One great example is if you look at the last, I think, 20, 30 years, 2.8% of venture capital has gone to female founders, which is very small because I think 50% of the world is women.
I think so.
And then if you look at US colleges today, for example, I think 60% of college students are women. So if you think about the future, most likely a lot more of the world's biggest companies are going to be built by female founders. Since we invest so early, it's just finding the very best people and then backing them with capital. And sometimes they grew up in the slum in Mumbai and got a job early in Flipkart and did an incredible job, and then they are now want to build their own company. And sometimes they grew up in a wealthy suburb in New York and went to Harvard and then worked at Goldman Sachs and then built another company and I want to build another one, right? People can come from any type of background to really realize that those dreams now, and you can really target the world from anywhere. Like Spotify won against Apple in their core entertainment segment, music, out of Stockholm.
Yeah.
We live in a world today where for the first time ever, I think it really comes down to the intrinsics of people.
Yeah.
So if you look at Antler's portfolio now, we've just kind of backed the very best people, and 30% of our portfolio now has a female co-founder.
That's amazing.
And there we also had a great partnership with you guys at Microsoft to back female founders. So there was a grant program where you could provide them with access to more capital. So I think, we very much think about how do we back the future great entrepreneurs, and they are going to come from all cultures, all skin colors, all religions, all genders. Like you said, it's just how the world is going to develop, right? And if you want to invest into the future, you just got to find the best people no matter where they are. So we just try to be present where the best people are, and that leads to a much more diverse set of founders than we do see in the venture capital.
And I want to go back to your point around grit, drive, and spike.
Yeah.
That's the lens you're taking. It doesn't matter where that comes from. So amazing. No, thanks for that, Magnus.
And you're not born with it, right? Like you can develop a spike, you can develop drive, you can develop grit.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Grit actually you can develop just by trying to start a few companies because you will very quickly develop mental resilience.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, I would almost say, the tougher the person's background, the more typically they come from resilience, because they, and so that kind of helps with entrepreneurship as well. So thanks so much, Magnus, for having this chat with me. Like I said, I pinned you down, so I was able to have a much deeper conversation on a lot of things I didn't know about. So thank you so much, and appreciate you coming down here and doing this with us.
Excellent. Great to do this together now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into the AI Edge by Microsoft. If this conversation sparked new ideas or insights, follow and share to stay connected to the pulse of AI innovation in Asia. Until next time, keep leading, keep building, and stay curious.